In our continuing discussion on fiscal reforms, our next guest warns that removing the 12% VAT could be economically risky. Let's ask him why. Paolo Rivera is Senior Research Fellow of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies and joins us now in the studio. Good seeing you again, JP.
Hi, good morning, Patty, and to all the viewers.
Yeah, so what do you make of what Sec Gary said there? I mean, what comes off to me is that he's asking everybody to just take a pause.
Well, I agree with Secretary Gary, but from my end, I would like to emphasize as well that I think this is more of a spending problem rather than a tax problem. Because the value-added tax is really the most stable, broad-based source of revenue of the government. And if we're going to look back at history when the VAT was increased from 10% to 12%, it actually gave the government some degree of liquidity, allowing the government during that time to address the chronic budget deficit happening during that time. I'm not saying that we were able to eliminate the budget deficit, but it turned into a more manageable level.
But is it an efficient revenue source?
The VAT
That's been 20 years on.
The VAT remains to be an efficient revenue source of the government because number one, it's very easy to collect, and number two, it is broad-based that everyone is actually subjected to it, and it's very difficult to evade the VAT. And because of that, government is assured of some degree of source of revenue that it can actually use for public spending, for social protection, education, and health. But again, that's why I'm seeing that this is more of a spending problem rather than a tax collection problem.
Do we have data on that? You just mentioned public infrastructure, spending, going to social services. Where have our VAT collections gone?
Well, the thing about VAT is that it is lumped into the national government revenue, and it is up to the general appropriations to have it disbursed to different programs, activities, and projects by the government. And unlike a particular tax, like let's say travel tax, no? The one that we pay when we leave the Philippines, it is actually accounted that a proportion of this travel tax actually goes to higher education. But for VAT, it's really not the case because it is just lumped into this treasury. But we can see that the revenues that the government is actually receiving is expected to be spent on services that would alleviate the poverty. No?
That's the thing, is expected. And a lot of people right now are struggling with trust. How then does the VAT stand in an era where trust is lacking?
Actually, I would understand the calls for the reduction or even the abolishment of the VAT, because it is one of the taxes that is actually applied to everyone, and everyone is actually affected by these corruption issues, ghost projects. Imagine lives are at cost because of the faulty, substandard infrastructure, and the only way that the public has control is this VAT. And the calls to abolish it is perfectly understandable. It is bold, but it is actually economically risky because it actually removes that fiscal buffer, that liquidity buffer that the Philippines currently has in preparation, if ever, another crisis may happen.
Yeah, make us understand when you say fiscal buffer, economic buffer to an angry Filipino. How do you make them understand? We're dealing with emotions here so raw.
Yeah, that's quite challenging. I mean, talking about something that's so objective with emotion. But consider a household wherein we have a lot of money, a lot of income being generated, and we do not know what's happening outside with the Trump tariffs, geopolitical instability outside. And if a country has no liquidity buffer, then if an impending crisis can happen, what will we use? In 2008, when the global financial crisis happened, the increase in VAT from 10 to 12% actually gave the Philippines this liquidity buffer. Other countries were implementing austerity measures, but the Philippines still managed to post positive growth during those years, and we were covered from the ill effects of the crisis, allowing us to continue providing public services, continuing the infrastructure, and all other government projects leading to the next administration. And that liquidity buffer saved the country from further problems as caused by the crisis.
Let's flip that, because it appears that the bigger risk right now, if you ask some of those that I speak with, it's really what's happening here, not overseas. Can VAT save us from what's going on right now? at worst case scenario, we don't get what we need. The people don't get the kind of accountability that they're asking for.
Well, the VAT cannot fully save us. It can only do so much. But then it gives us some steps ahead to be able to counter any internal or external threats that may happen to the economy. That's why this is really an issue of good governance. If those in power are able to spend the taxes wisely, according to what your interview yesterday, spend it on the programs, on the national developmental programs of the government, then we can expect greater productivity. And the trust of the public, even investors, would be restored. Trust in governance and trust in the economy.
Well, thanks so much for putting that into perspective,
Okay.
JP. I much appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
JP Rivera of PIDS.